Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're digging into a stack of sources that honestly make you question some fundamental things about modern health.
You really do.
Like, not just what causes chronic illness, but is the medical system we have actually designed to find every root cause? Or does it prioritize certain kinds of answers?
That's exactly it. The listener who brought these sources in framed it perfectly.
It's a two-parter, right? First is the structure, the money, the standardization built for complex, patentable solutions. And second, if that's true, has that created a massive blind spot for something simpler, something fundamental that's being missed?
And that's our mission today. We are going to unpack those layers, the history, the finances, the science behind chronic disease management.
And then really zeroing in on one specific thing the sources point to.
Yes, this potentially overlooked mechanism. T3 cellular starvation. We're going to explore how a lack of this single active hormone might be, well, maybe not causing, but definitely enhancing the progression of so many diseases. We're talking neurological issues, autoimmune conditions, you name it.
T3 cellular starvation.
Uh-oh.
Okay, it sounds significant, and the claims are huge. So here's the big question for you, the listener, to keep in mind as we go through this. If a simple, non-patentable root cause was actually driving or accelerating almost all chronic diseases, depression, diabetes, autoimmunity, fatigue, would our current system, the way it's structured right now, even be able to find it? Would it have the incentive, the framework?
It's a tough question, incentives versus outcomes. And to really grasp why this T3 issue might be missed clinically, we absolutely have to start with how medicine got standardized in the first place.
Okay, let's get into that history. Because whenever you talk about why modern medicine focuses so much on, patented drugs and really complex stuff, the name Rockefeller comes up.
Almost always.
Yeah, and usually with this narrative that he wanted to control medicine just to make money. We need to be careful here, though. What's the real story versus maybe the conspiracy theory stuff?
Absolutely. We have to stick to the documented facts. And the sources are clear. That famous quote, the one where Rockefeller supposedly says medicine is the best way to make money and he'll control what doctors learn.
Yeah, I've seen that one.
There's no verified record of him ever saying it. It gets passed around a lot in critiques of big pharma, but there's no credible source.
Okay, so fact check. That specific quote is likely bogus. He made his money in oil, not plotting to sell drugs from the start, but his influence was still massive, right? So what did he actually do that shaped the system?
What's absolutely true and documented is the immense power of his philanthropy. His oil fortune poured money into the institutions that standardized medicine. The big one was funding the Flexner Report back in 1910.
The Flexner Report. I admit I hadn't heard of it before digging into these sources. It sounds kind of bureaucratic.
Yeah.
How did a report change everything so drastically?
Well, it was this huge investigation into nearly every medical school in the U.S. and Canada at the time. Abraham Flexner basically recommended a massive overhaul. Centralization, standardization, and a really strict focus on science-based training tied to universities. Now, this was partly a reaction to some really poor quality schools that were just commercial ventures.
So it improved standards, which sounds good.
It did improve scientific rigor, no question. Sanitation, surgery, huge leaps forward.
But there was a trade-off. That's where the narrowing happened.
Exactly. The consequence was huge. Over half the existing medical schools shut down. And many of those were schools teaching different approaches, alternative, non-allopathic traditions.
Like what kind of schools?
Schools focused on eclectic medicine, herbalism, and especially homeopathy. They just didn't fit the new model, which demanded everything be rooted in lab science, chemistry, not based on symptoms or holistic views or plants. So while quality control went up, the scope of what was considered acceptable medicine got much, much narrower. It really focused things down onto what you could measure in a lab and eventually what you could synthesize into a drug.
Okay, so you've got this narrower, standardized approach, and that needs a new way to prove things work. Right? That's where the regulations come in, demanding the famous gold standard.
The randomized double-blind trial, the RCT.
Right.
Yeah, the sources show the modern RCT really started taking shape mid-20th century. Landmark trials like the streptomycin studies in the late 40s. But the big legal shift in the U.S. was the Kefauver-Harris amendments in 1962. That's what locked it in. Suddenly, drugs didn't just have to be safe, they had to prove they were effective through well-controlled trials.
Which basically meant RCTs.
Which meant expensive, complex, double-blind RCTs.
Okay, so standardized doctors focused on labs, plus a regulatory system demanding the most rigorous and therefore most expensive kind of proof. You can see where this is going.
Yeah.
The money.
The financial bias becomes almost unavoidable at that point.
How so?
Well, think about it. RCTs can cost hundreds of millions of dollars. So who's going to fund that?
Someone who expects to make that money back and then some?
Exactly. The funding naturally flows towards treatments that offer the biggest potential financial return. And what offers the biggest return?
Something you can patent. Something you can have exclusively.
Precisely. Patentable products that give you market exclusivity. This creates a huge bias in what even gets researched.
So potentially effective things that aren't patentable, they just fall by the wayside.
Often, yes. Simple lifestyle changes, older generic drugs that are off patent, natural compounds from nutrition. They frequently go untested at that rigorous RCT level.
Yeah.
Not because they don't work necessarily, but because no company can get the financial return needed to justify that massive RCT investment.
Wow. So the research agenda gets skewed. It's not purely about what patients need most. It's about what can generate the most profit through exclusivity.
That's the argument the sources make, yes. And you see the results reflected starkly in how drug costs have exploded.
Yeah, it's not just creeping up, is it?
Oh.
It feels exponential.
It is exponential, and it's way beyond normal inflation. Drug costs really started shooting up in the 90s and 2000s. Think specialty drugs, biologics.
And ways to keep patents going longer.
Right, patent gaming, sometimes called evergreening. But the acceleration recently is just staggering. The average launch price for a new drug jumped something like 20 times between 2008 and 2021.
20 times. That's insane. People often think, well, it's because everyone's getting sicker. Demand is just through the roof.
But the sources push back on that being the only reason or even the main driver of the cost explosion.
Okay.
Yes, chronic illness is incredibly common. 60% of adults have at least one condition, 40% have two or more. That's a huge burden. But the increase in how many people have these conditions is steady. It's not exponential like the costs are.
Ah, so the number of sick people isn't rising exponentially, but the price per drug is.
Exactly. The main driver of the exponential cost increase is the price per drug. And that's fueled by things like patent loopholes that delay generics, a lack of real price caps or negotiation in many markets.
It feeds itself, doesn't it?
It seems to. High prices are needed to fund the incredibly expensive trials, and those trials and the patents justify the high prices and exclusivity. It's like a closed loop.
In a loop that favors complexity, exclusivity, maybe not simple, cheap, widely available answers.
That's the risk. A standardized education, regulations demanding costly proof, and a financial model rewarding patents. It creates, well, a perfect storm for potential blind spots.
Okay, let's pause on that systemic picture. It sets the stage perfectly for asking, what are the potentially cheap, overlooked answers that this system might be missing?
Right. So if the system is geared towards these high-dollar complex solutions, what might we be overlooking in just basic human physiology? Where do diseases actually start?
Well, we could start broad, right? The public health stuff, we all know the big risk factors. Poor diet, smoking, not moving enough, chronic stress, lack of sleep, environmental toxins.
Inequality, too?
Yeah, socioeconomic factors play a huge role. These are the big triggers we hear about all the time.
Correct. Those are the macro-level risks. But if you want to intervene effectively clinically, you need to get more specific. You need to look at the measurable biological failures that those big triggers eventually cause.
Like the downstream effects inside the body.
Exactly. It's like a hierarchy of failure that ultimately leads to the chronic diseases we name.
Okay, so let's list those out. The sources mention about 10 key lab measurable root causes. These are the things doctors often actually test for and try to treat directly.
Right. The list includes things like chronic inflammation. You measure that with hsCRP or maybe IL-6.
Okay.
Insulin resistance measured with OCA-IR or HbA1c. Dyslipidemia, often looking at ApoB levels now. Oxidative stress, maybe looking at glutathione levels.
Toxic metals.
Yep, heavy metals. Nutrient deficiencies, classic ones are vitamin D, B12, chronic infections like underlying viruses, EBV, Lyme, things like that.
Gut health too, right?
Absolutely. That dysbiosis, you might measure zonulin for leaky gut or look at the microbiome. Elevated homocysteine is another one. And crucially for today's discussion, hormonal imbalances.
So those 10, they're usually seen as the direct problems to fix. But they all interact, don't they? It's messy.
Incredibly messy. Chronic inflammation drives insulin resistance. Gut problems cause inflammation and stop you absorbing nutrients. Oxidative stress makes everything worse. It's this huge, tangled, self-reinforcing,
Vicious circle.
exactly, a massive vicious circle. Clinicians spend entire careers trying to untangle and manage these 10 factors.
Okay, but here's the pivot point for today. What if one specific hormonal imbalance isn't just one of the 10, but acts like a master switch?
The root cause of the root causes, as the sources put it.
Yeah. What if one specific failure makes all the other 10 problems worse or harder to fix? What if the common denominator in all these tangled circles isn't just inflammation or insulin, but a failure in the body's main regulator of cellular energy?
And that is precisely where the idea of T3 cellular starvation comes in.
Okay, the thyroid.
Yeah.
Most people know TSH, thyroid-stimulating hormone. That's the signal from the brain to the thyroid. And maybe they know T4. But you're saying the real action, the power, is in T3. Let's break down how we get from T4 to T3, because this conversion seems absolutely critical.
It is the critical step. So the thyroid gland itself mostly pumps out T4. Think of T4 as like the inactive storage form of the hormone. It's the potential energy, the fuel in the barrel.
Yeah, stored fuel.
Exactly. But for that fuel to actually run the engine, T4 has to be converted into T3. And this conversion doesn't happen much in the thyroid itself. It happens out in the body tissues, mostly the liver, the gut, your muscles.
Peripheral conversion?
Peripheral conversion, yes.
Yeah.
And T3 is the active form. It's the metabolic power switch. T3 is what actually goes into the cell nucleus, binds to receptors, and tells your mitochondria, your cellular power plants, how much energy to make, how fast to run.
Got it. T4 storage, T3 action.
Yeah.
But the sources argue that this conversion process, it breaks down, especially under stress.
It often does. When the body is under significant stress, and that can mean chronic illness, inflammation, severe emotional stress, trauma, surgery, even just significant nutrient deficiencies, the conversion pathway gets disrupted.
Broken, as you said earlier. What happens then? Where does the T4 go if it's not becoming T3?
The body has an alternative pathway. Instead of converting T4 into active T3, the accelerator, the body starts preferentially converting T4 into something called reverse T3 or RT3.
First T3, so it's not just inactive like T4.
No, it's worse than inactive. It's actively inhibitory. Think of reverse T3 as the body's emergency brake.
The break, okay.
It signals the cells to basically go into a protective hibernation mode, a low energy state. And here's the really crucial part. RT3 looks structurally very similar to T3.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, so it can actually bind to the same T3 receptors on the cell, but when it binds, nothing happens. It just sits there, blocking the active T3 from getting in and doing its job.
So it literally slams the brakes on the cell's metabolism and its ability to repair itself.
Precisely. It forces the cell to power down. That is T3 cellular starvation. The cell is screaming for energy, but the message isn't getting through because the receptor is blocked by the brake pedal.
And this is the blind spot you mentioned earlier. Because this state, plenty of T4, maybe even normal TSH, but tons of reverse T3 blocking the active T3, this is what millions of people might be experiencing.
That's the core argument. Millions feel exhausted, depressed, they can't lose weight, brain fog. They go to the doctor runs the standard thyroid panel.
Which is usually just TSH, maybe free T4.
Exactly. That's what current conventional guidelines from bodies like the AACE, American Association of Clinical Endocrinologists, or the ATA, American Thyroid Association, generally recommend. They look at the brain's signal, TSH, and the storage hormone, T4.
And they just assume the conversion to T3 is happening fine.
They assume it's working properly. But those guidelines, partly born out of that historical push for standardization and easily measurable markers we talked about.
Right, the system we discussed in Section 1.
They don't typically require or even sometimes encourage testing the things that show the actual cellular situation.
What's missing from that standard panel then?
What's missing is routinely measuring the active hormone, free T3, and measuring the inhibitory hormone, reverse T3, and critically looking at the ratio between them.
The T3 to reverse T3 ratio.
Yes, because even if free T3 looks okay on its own, if reverse T3 is sky high, the ratio is terrible, and that active T3 still can't get its job done.
So the sources argue this lack of comprehensive testing means millions have normal labs, according to standard practice.
But they are profoundly T3 starved at the cellular level. They fall through the cracks of conventional care. And this makes low cellular T3 potentially a massive, unrecognized driver of modern chronic illness.
It fits perfectly with the history of thyroid treatment too, doesn't it? There was a big shift mid-century.
A huge shift. Before the 1950s or so, if you were hypothyroid, the standard treatment was natural desiccated thyroid, NDT, like Armour thyroid or MP thyroid today.
And what's in that?
It's made from dried pig thyroid glands, and it naturally contains both T4 and T3, plus other thyroid components. So it gave patients the active T3 directly. It bypassed any potential conversion problem.
But then things changed.
Then came the push for synthetic, pure, chemically consistent drugs, easier to dose precisely, and the standard of care shifted almost completely to synthetic T4-only medications. Levothyroxine, Synthroid, that became the go-to.
And that whole shift was based on one massive assumption,
That everyone converts T4 to T3 efficiently and reliably.
which might not be true for a huge number of people.
Exactly. If you're someone, and the sources suggest this could be a very large group due to genetics, chronic inflammation, stress, gut issues, and nutrient status, if you're someone who doesn't convert T4 well, then taking only T4.
It doesn't fix the core problem. It might even make it worse.
It could lock you into a state where your body takes that T4 you're giving it and just shunts more of it down the reverse T3 pathway, especially if you're inflamed or stressed.
Wow.
And the timing is suggestive, isn't it? The rates of many chronic diseases, autoimmune conditions, metabolic syndrome, fatigue syndromes, neurological issues really started to climb significantly in the decades after this widespread shift to T4-only treatment became the standard.
So the plausible correlation is that this shift might have inadvertently created a vast population that is functionally hypothyroid at the cellular level, even if their TSH looks fine, making them more susceptible to all the other problems we call chronic illness.
That's the hypothesis. A population primed for the cascade of chronic disease because their fundamental cellular energy switch is dimmed.
Okay, now let's get really granular. This feels like the absolute core of the deep dive. If T3 is this universal power switch for our cells, how exactly does turning that switch down, even partially, cause or worsen so many different kinds of diseases? It sounds almost too broad, Like, how can one thing be linked to depression and diabetes and autoimmunity and fatigue? Doesn't that make you skeptical?
It's a very fair point, and skepticism is crucial here. The sources aren't claiming T3 starvation causes all these diseases directly, like a virus causes the flu.
Okay, that's an important distinction.
Instead, the argument is that T3 deficiency acts as a universal amplifier or enabler. It's the underlying failure mechanism that stops cells from properly resisting or repairing the damage caused by all those other root causes. We listed the inflammation, the oxidative stress, the insulin resistance, the toxins.
So it's like trying to run a complex repair shop with the power turned down low. Nothing works efficiently.
That's a great analogy. When a cell is T3 starved, it has to power down its most energy-intensive functions. And what are those? Making energy itself, mitochondria, controlling inflammation, detoxifying waste products, healing and regenerating, all the critical stuff.
So T3 doesn't directly cause, say, autoimmune disease, but if your immune cells are T3 starved, they can't regulate themselves properly, making an autoimmune attack more likely or harder to stop.
Precisely. The cell starts missing a beat, functionally. And when enough cells miss enough beats for long enough, that accumulates as symptoms, and eventually as diagnosed chronic disease.
Okay, let's map this out system by system, like the sources do. Start with the nervous system. Low thyroid function is so often just labeled as depression or anxiety.
And often mistakenly so, according to this model. T3 is absolutely vital for nerve cells, for neurons. It helps regulate their growth, how they branch out and connect. But maybe even more importantly, T3 directly influences the production and balance of key neurotransmitters.
Like serotonin and dopamine.
Exactly. The big ones for mood, motivation, focus. When your nerve cells don't have enough T3, the function that drops off is stable signaling and mood regulation. The brain chemistry gets disrupted at a fundamental level.
Which leads directly to
Clinical depression and anxiety. And critically, it might explain why these conditions are often so resistant to standard treatments like SSRIs for some people. The drugs might be trying to boost serotonin, but if the cell doesn't have the basic T3 energy to build and use neurotransmitter efficiently in the first place,
the SSRI can't work properly.
it might be less effective, yes. The underlying energy deficit isn't being addressed.
And what about more severe neurological problems, dementia, cognitive decline?
The brain is incredibly energy hungry. Neurons need a constant, massive supply of power from their mitochondria. T3 is essential for that mitochondrial function and for protecting neurons from damage.
So T3 starvation hits the brain hard.
Very hard. When T3 is low, neurons can't produce energy efficiently. They struggle to manage oxidative stress. They can't clear out waste proteins effectively, things like amyloid beta, for example. This accelerates the processes linked to cognitive decline, dementia, including Alzheimer's, and potentially contributing to Parkinson's pathology as well.
And you mentioned schizophrenia, too.
Yes, the sources suggest T3 dysfunction can be a modulating factor, potentially worsening symptoms or contributing to treatment resistance in conditions like schizophrenia, likely because T3 plays a role in dopamine regulation and overall brain energy balance, which are known to be disrupted in these conditions.
Wow. Okay, let's shift to the body's engine room, muscles and metabolism. This is where we see the classic fatigue and weight gain symptoms, right?
Absolutely. This is a prime example of cellular power failure. T3 directly tells the mitochondria, the powerhouses in your muscle and fat cells, how much energy to produce. It's also crucial for mitochondrial biogenesis. That's the process of making new, healthy mitochondria when old ones wear out.
So low T3 means fewer power plants and the ones you have run slowly.
Exactly. T3 also regulates things called uncoupling proteins, UCPs. These are important for generating heat, thermogenesis, and basically allowing your body to burn off energy efficiently rather than storing it all as fat.
So when T3 is low, what functions drop?
Efficient energy production and cellular repair plummet. Your metabolic rate slows way down. This is why low cellular T3 is so strongly linked to the profound body-wide fatigue you see in chronic fatigue syndrome, MECFS. It's also linked to the widespread, often unexplained muscle and connective tissue pain of fibromyalgia. The cells just don't have the energy to function or repair properly.
And the metabolic consequences.
A slowed metabolism makes it incredibly difficult to lose weight, leading to persistent obesity. It disrupts how your body handles sugar and fat, directly contributing to type 2 diabetes and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease in AFLD. You're essentially running the furnace on low all the time.
Okay, next major area, the immune system and the gut. These are so interconnected, especially with autoimmunity. How does T3 starvation impact this?
T3 is critical for maintaining the gut lining, our first line of defense against the outside world. Specifically, it helps keep the tight junctions between intestinal cells strong and sealed.
Tight junctions. That's what prevents leaky gut.
Exactly. When your gut lining cells are starved of T3 energy, the key function that drops is maintaining that barrier integrity. The junctions loosen up. This leads directly to conditions like IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and the broader issue of leaky gut syndrome.
And leaky gut lets things through that shouldn't get through.
Undigested food particles, bacterial toxins, they leak into the bloodstream. This triggers a massive immune response, systemic inflammation, and is considered a key driver of autoimmunity.
So T3 starvation makes the gut leaky, which then triggers or worsens autoimmune responses.
Yes. T3 deficiency directly compromises the immune system's ability to regulate itself properly, too. It can't tell friend from foe as effectively. This dysfunction can worsen and potentially even help trigger a whole range of autoimmune diseases.
You think which ones?
The sources link it to lupus, SLE, rheumatoid arthritis, RA, multiple sclerosis, MS, celiac disease, and inflammatory bowel diseases like Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, UC. With Crohn's, for instance, low T3 impairs the gut lining's ability to heal after inflammation, making the disease harder to manage.
It also affects fighting infections.
Definitely. Your immune cells need huge amounts of energy to fight off invaders effectively and then stand down appropriately. T3 starvation weakens this response. This can make it harder to clear or control persistent infections like EBV, Epstein-Barr virus, chronic candida overgrowth, or recover fully from things like long COVID, where lingering fatigue and immune dysregulation are common. The immune system just doesn't have the T3-driven energy it needs.
Okay, two more systems, cardiovascular and the broader hormonal system.
In the cardiovascular system, T3 helps regulate heart rate and the force of contraction, but it's also absolutely crucial for cholesterol metabolism.
How so?
T3 actually controls how many LDL receptors your liver makes. These receptors are what pull LDL cholesterol out of your blood. So if T3 is low, the function that drops is efficient cholesterol clearance. You make fewer LDL receptors, so your liver can't grab onto and remove LDL effectively. This can lead to stubbornly high cholesterol, even if your diet seems okay, and increases the long-term risk of heart disease. Low T3 can also contribute to certain types of anemia.
And finally, the general hormonal system. Sex hormones, cycles.
T3 influences the entire endocrine system. For example, it affects the production of sex hormone-binding globulin, SHBG, which controls how much free testosterone and estrogen are available in your body. It also plays a role in regulating menstrual cycles.
So T3 starvation throws other hormones off
It
balance.
can definitely contribute. When that regulatory function drops, you can see downstream effects manifesting as conditions like PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome, which involves insulin resistance and hormonal imbalance, infertility, and various other menstrual disorders.
Okay, that mapping is incredibly comprehensive. It really paints T3 starvation not as one specific illness, but as this foundational energy crisis that allows all sorts of other chronic problems to take root and flourish.
That's the core idea. It weakens the foundations of cellular health across the board.
Which brings us to the crucial question. If someone's been sick for years, maybe decades, and this cellular damage is built up, is there hope? Can fixing the T3 deficiency actually reverse things, or is it sometimes too late?
That's a really important note of caution. We have to be realistic. In some situations, if there's been extensive permanent tissue damage, say severe joint destruction in RA or advanced neurodegeneration, then simply restoring T3 might not fully reverse all aspects of the damage.
Okay.
However, the sources strongly argue that addressing the T3 deficiency is almost always beneficial, even in advanced cases. Why? Because you're restoring the fundamental potential for cellular energy production and repair. You're giving the cells the basic fuel they need to even attempt to heal or function better.
You're turning the power back on in the repair shop, even if some tools are broken.
Exactly. You're creating the necessary condition for other therapies to potentially work better.
So what does that intervention look like, going back to that pre-1950s approach?
The historical approach, and the one suggested by many practitioners who focus on this today, often involves a therapeutic trial of a low dose of NDT natural desiccated thyroid, the kind that contains both T4 and T3.
Giving the body the active T3 directly.
Yes, bypassing the potentially faulty conversion process entirely. It's not presented as a magic bullet cure-all, but as restoring the foundational cellular energy supply. It's giving the body the power it needs to even begin responding more effectively to everything else you might be doing: diet changes, stress reductions, supplements, treating infections, etc. Hashtag outro.
Wow, okay, so this deep dive really connects the dots, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How the way modern medicine evolved, focusing on patents, standardizing testing around TSH and T4, might have accidentally created this huge, decades-long blind spot.
It seems plausible based on the history and the science presented.
And the blind spot is for this critical hormone, T3, at the cellular level. We've laid out the case that T3 cellular starvation isn't just a minor symptom. It could be acting as that root cause of root causes.
Amplifying or enabling maybe 24 different chronic conditions by fundamentally starving cells of the energy they need to function, defend, and repair themselves.
From depression and fatigue to autoimmunity and metabolic chaos.
Exactly. So the key takeaway for you, the listener, really has to be this. If you are struggling with chronic health issues, maybe it's persistent depression, maybe crushing fatigue, maybe you can't lose weight no matter what, maybe it's an autoimmune flare and you've been told over and over again your thyroid labs are normal.
Don't necessarily stop there.
Don't stop there if your symptoms scream otherwise. You absolutely need to investigate the conversion issue. Don't rely only on TSH and free T4. They are important pieces, but they don't show the whole picture of what's happening at the cell.
So if the symptoms are there, despite normal standard labs, what's the specific actionable test someone should ask for or seek out from a practitioner who understands this?
You need to get the free T3 and the reverse T3, RT3 levels tested. And crucially, you need to look at the free T3 to reverse T3 ratio.
That ratio tells you the balance between the gas pedal, T3, and the brake pedal, RT3.
Precisely. It gives you a much clearer window into whether your body is successfully making active hormone or if it's stuck diverting T4 into the inhibitory RT3, leading to cellular starvation, even if TSH looks fine.
Okay, and is there a benchmark for that ratio? What should someone look for?
The goal is a healthy conversion, meaning you want relatively high free T3 compared to reverse T3. A low ratio indicates poor conversion. The body is making too much brake, RT3, relative to the gas, T3. While lab ranges can vary slightly, a key benchmark often cited is that you generally want that free T3 to reverse T3 ratio to be greater than 10. When using typical US units like PGML for free T3 and NGL for reverse T3, calculation requires unit conversion first, or use online calculators specifically designed for this ratio. If your ratio is significantly below 10, especially if you have the classic symptom,
That strongly suggests T3 starvation is a major issue.
it strongly suggests that this cellular energy deficit is a primary root cause that needs serious clinical investigation and potentially targeted treatment, perhaps like the NDT trial we discussed.
That gives people something concrete to look into. Okay, we always like to end with a final thought for you to chew on.
Right.
Considering everything we've discussed, if inadequate T3 conversion, which is often triggered or worsened by the chronic inflammation or chronic stress that are just rampant in modern life, if that conversion failure stops your cells from making enough energy to run properly, to heal, to regenerate, could it be that optimizing thyroid function at the cellular level, making sure your cells actually get enough T3, isn't just another therapy, but maybe the essential first step, the necessary foundation that has to be in place before any diet change, any supplement, any fancy drug protocol can truly work its best to help your body heal?
It's a powerful question. Is getting the cellular power turned back on the prerequisite for everything else? Investigate your ratios. Thank you for joining us on the deep dive.